Welcome to Films and Stuff with your hosts, Pete Mitchell and Ethan Hunt.
Welcome back. It is Films and Stuff. We've got a special New Year's Eve day, stream or skip edition.
That's right. How are you, Ethan?
Everything is great. We took a short hiatus for the winter holiday, and I think that we've both packed in a lot of shows, not as many movies, but a lot of shows into that time. So we probably need a separate episode to catch everybody up on what we've watched. But one of the things we had was the last stream or skip assignment of the year 2022.
That's right. So just to give a quick recap, Ethan has made a list for me, Pete, and I have made a list for Ethan. We watch these shows. We watch at least two episodes, maybe more. We try to get an understanding of whether we're going to like these shows or not, and then we give you quick fire reviews.
That's right. What did you have this week?
So for the last week of 2022, I had to watch Gunpowder, and that was on HBO Max.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure it's on HBO Max.
Yeah.
And this is a based on true life, let's say, story. It's almost like a biopic, but not quite. And it's set in 17th century England. Have you heard of...
Is this about Guy Fawkes?
It is about Guy Fawkes. That's exactly right.
Oh, all right.
So I didn't know anything about this. And I think most people outside of England, I'm going to take a wild guess to say that they don't know about it. But most people will know of the Gunpowder plot only because it was one of the leading, let's say, plot points of the movie V for Vendetta. V is for Vendetta.
Yeah, I think it's one of those historical events that everybody kind of thinks that they know enough about that they don't investigate further. But if you'd ask them what it's about, they would just say it was some type of either independence or treasonous plot that involved a bunch of explosives underneath the parliament, is it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And frankly speaking, that's all I knew of it as well. Right. And I'm not, history. I like history, don't get me wrong, but this period of history, not my favorite. I'm a fan of, historical dramas from the
Bridgerton fan.
century.
You could just say you're a Bridgerton fan.
I'm a Bridgerton man. Yes. So yeah, it's a historical drama. It's based on a true story. It's only 3 episodes. It's a mini series. It was, I think, came out in 2017 or 18, something like that. The only famous person that I think is a household name that most people will know is Kit Harington, aka Jon Snow from Game of Thrones.
Oh yeah.
But like most British miniseries, there's a lot of British actors that I'm sure you'll all recognize from a variety of other shows, even though you may not be able to name them outright. So there's some actors from Sherlock, there's some other actors in there. And of course, I'd be remiss to mention this, my childhood crush, Liv Tyler, is in this show as well.
Liv Tyler is your childhood crush?
Yeah, wasn't she everybody's?
I think she was. Yeah, I think she was a very common childhood crush, but I didn't know that.
Yeah. So exactly. So, but back to it. The premise is that it's about the Gunpowder plot, which, as we vaguely know, it is about it's about blowing up Parliament, but really it's also. There's a religious element to it, which I think most people don't know. And it's because Catholics in England were being persecuted at the time. And so they tried to blow up Parliament and assassinate the king, King James I, to replace them with a monarch who's more favorable to Catholics.
Okay.
right? And of course, at this time, the English Protestants and the Church of England were dominating. In fact, I'd say they're continuing to dominate in the UK religion, let's say, scheme. And so that's what this show is about. Again, it is not my bag, but I have to admit, first of all,
It's just a one season. It's just a one season, like 8 to 10 episodes.
Not even. It's 3 episodes. It's a miniseries,
Oh,
3
that's it?
episodes. Each one is like about an hour and a half long. So they're like 3 movies kind of thing.
Andor
And
style.
that's it. It's
Yeah.
exceedingly high production values. And I think it comes down to the fact that there's only a few episodes. And of course, as you would expect, incredibly good acting. It is something that I would consider normally for me to be a skip because this historical period does nothing for me. But I have to recognize that the acting is fantastic, production is excellent, set pieces are very good, costume design is excellent. It's a mooch. It is for sure a mooch, especially if you're a fan of historical dramas, especially if you're a fan of this era. Personally speaking, I wouldn't watch this, but I understand that for others, it would be a very, very good watch, if not a must subscribe. So I'm going to settle on saying that it's a mooch for me.
Okay. Well, that's positive. It's always nice to watch something that is, I mean, I guess that you could say this is more than based on a true story. It's a recreation of a true story, but it's always nice that there's something historical that you can learn about, but at the same time, you don't actually know how it goes, right? Because you don't actually have enough background about it. You just know that it's about a historical event.
Right.
All right. Well, I guess we have a similar theme then this week because I was assigned Dickinson, about Emily Dickinson on Apple TV Plus. And I have to say, I really did not know a lot about Emily Dickinson, apart from the fact that she lived a long time ago, and I had to look it up. She was born in 1830, and she lived until 1886. I mean, that's a long time ago, right? I mean, that's 150 years ago or more. So she was a very famous American poet, but she was not famous during her lifetime. During her lifetime, she was at best considered a little bit eccentric. She never married. She didn't have a lot of friends. She stayed in her room. She was obsessed with, she may have had OCD. I mean, obviously a little bit undiagnosed, and I'm certainly not an expert on it. But I mean, she had she was fond of only wearing like white clothing, and you know, in her writing, she focused on kind of like strange themes like death and immortality. You know, topics like this that were, you know, a little bit strange in, you know, American society, you know, 150 years ago when we're talking about like Massachusetts, right? So during her lifetime, she was not very widely published. I think she only published like 10 poems, and a lot of them were published under a like a different name. And a lot of them apparently were heavily edited, but that's something that I think scholars haven't really agreed on as a consensus. But this series, and it's 3 seasons long, starting from 2019 to 2021, stars, as we know very, very well, it stars Haley Steinfeld, right?
That's right.
What have we seen her in recently?
I think most recently was probably Hawkeye on Disney
Hawkeye.
Plus.
Yeah, I think we've seen her in Hawkeye most recently. But she's been in a lot of things like True Grit, Ender's Game.
Of course,
when you look through her filmology, I mean, she's got quite a career already for someone who's only like 26 or so. So let's get down to the details of it. Is it a very high quality show? Yes. Is Haley Steinfeld exceptional portraying Emily Dickinson in her youth? Yes. Is this a entertaining show? For me, no, it is not. I would give this a skip. And I say that with a little bit of reluctance because it is very well done. I cannot say that it's more a matter of taste than a matter of quality. But Pete, do you remember weeks and weeks and weeks ago, I was assigned Our Flag Means Death. Do you remember that show that I reviewed on our Stream and Skip?
Taika Waititi show
Yes.
with Rhys Darby on HBO Max.
Absolutely right. This show, Dickinson, is very similar to that, in my opinion, in that it's really well done. The costumes are exceptional, the settings are exceptional, the writing is great, the directing, the acting, everything, blah, blah, blah. But it just doesn't hit the right notes with me. So I think one of the ways that this Dickinson, which has won some awards, and Steinfeld's won at least one Peabody Award for it, it was supposed to be kind of a modern comedy drama. You know, like it wasn't modern in the sense that it was based on current events. It was modern in the sense that it just kind of had a little bit of a playful theme throughout, you know? And, you know, a lot like Our Flag Means Death, Steinfeld makes a lot of comments, you know, throughout the few episodes that I watched, just kind of being a little bit snarky about some of the themes that were, you know, prevalent in like the 1800s, you know, the gender roles, you know, the misogyny, you know, the need to everything focused on society and getting married and, you know, a woman's place and, you know, the amount of time it took to cook and to get water and things like that.
Okay.
It's clever. Don't get me wrong. It's clever writing, but it wasn't really like striking a chord for me. Like it wasn't laugh out loud funny. It was just kind of like these clever little mutterings or asides that she was saying, and she delivers them very well. But the show wasn't really like grabbing me. There wasn't a lot of like intrigue. There wasn't any mystery. It wasn't laugh out loud funny. There was no action. It was just a modernized take on Emily Dickinson's life and you know, the admittedly significant, you know, like trials and tribulations that she had kind of growing up in that era and being somebody who wasn't interested in having a family or, you know, child rearing, someone who is really passionate about, you know, writing and learning and education. So I give it a skip because it really fell flat for me. I can't even give it a mooch. It's really a skip for me, but that's not to take away from the quality. I would assume that there's a lot of people out there that like it, that are entertained by it, you know, that are able to connect better than I can. But for me, I just wasn't able to make that connection to it. So it's an absolute skip for me. Sorry to say.
No, that's okay. So look, so like for Gunpowder, I think it's fair to say that there's probably an audience out there for this show.
Yeah.
And I think ultimately that's what's important. It's not for Pete. It's not for Ethan. It may not be for some of our listeners. It may be for a lot of our listeners. We don't know.
You know, there's something else about Dickinson, and you and I talked about this offline. For me, it's really hard when you look back 150 years, which is, for all intents and purposes, not just like a different lifetime, it's really a different world. It's very difficult to understand whether or not Emily Dickinson was really talented and whether she really did have these I guess barriers, or whether this is just kind of a assumption of, you know, what her life was like and what she faced. And maybe that's something that I also have a problem with, which is, you know, Emily Dickinson, you know, it just doesn't resonate with me, I think, as a poet. And maybe that's because I don't have a strong appreciation for the fine arts. But again, it's just something that it seems to be a figure kind of plucked from the past, and it wasn't something that I was really passionate about to begin with. Whereas, when you talked about kind of like the Guy Fawkes event, that's a very big event, I feel. I mean, maybe it doesn't have any, impact on my day-to-day life now. But at the time, that was a very, very big event. It involved a lot of people and there were like significant ramifications. Whereas Dickinson, I feel like, is a well-known historical figure, but she wasn't like a history-altering figure or involved in like any history-altering events.
Okay. That makes total sense, actually. I'm with you on the sense that not that poetry.
I mean, I think it's just easier to be passionate about a show or passionate about an event or a figure when you know how high the stakes were. And Dickinson, who's obviously an inspiration now, at the time, I mean, she was unknown and didn't really do anything to alter history. So I think for that reason, I just don't feel like the stakes for the show were that high for me.
Right. Yeah.
So in any case, that is our last stream or skip for 2022. Pete, how many did we do this year? Should we do like a quick recap? How many did we do this year? We did 26, huh?
Yeah, we did quite a fair bit this year. We did 26, and I think the number's probably maybe one or two more higher.
Yeah.
But in general, yeah, we knocked out quite a few shows that I don't think you and I would normally have watched.
Oh yeah.
Certainly we might have out of these 50 odd shows that we've seen, we may have stumbled on 3 to 5, maybe at most 10 of them, maybe through word of mouth. But I don't think there's let's put it this way. If it weren't for Streamer Skip, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have watched The Outer Range. I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have watched, I don't know, Industry or Minx or all of these shows. So I'm quite pleased with that.
How many 5s did you have? How many must subscribes did you have? I had 5, which is a pretty good percentage actually. How many did you have?
I had 8.
Whoa.
Yeah, I had 8. So I had almost
a third.
Almost a third. You had almost 20%. That's not bad, to be honest. That's not bad at all. And if you look at it, I think the key takeaway is this, right? So if you look at our scores, on average, I found that it was that for me, the scores were on average about a 3, which means
you're about
a mooch. And yours was just below that, between a mooch and a skip. But
I had 13 skips.
That's crazy.
I mean, and that's about right though, right? I mean, when you watch 26 shows.
Yeah, about half of them you couldn't be bothered with. You're right.
About half of them you say like, look, this isn't worth watching, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that I had 5 that I'm like, wow, I had Outer Range on Amazon Prime. I think absolutely if I would watch the first one on Amazon Prime, and if I didn't have a subscription, I absolutely would have subscribed for that. The same thing with The Old Man on Hulu, the same thing with Carnival Row, the same thing with, what were my other two? The Tourist and Yellow Jackets. Like, those 5 were exceptional. It's not a surprise that you've got, 13 that are just like, this isn't for me. Like I'm not going to continue, no reason to pay for this.
But I think the other key takeaway, which I'm quite pleased about, is that based on what you watched, I took some recommendations away from that.
Oh yeah.
And if you look at that, based on your recommendations, we scored it between a mooch and a must subscribe.
Yeah.
And I think that's the same for you. I think I was slightly more fortunate, or let's say your recommendations were better than mine were for you. Let's put it that way. But in both cases, our recommendations to each other based on Streamer Skip were better than the stream or skip results themselves.
Yeah. I'd also be a little bit more forgiving about that. And I'd say that, you know, some of the things that you watched, I watched just because I was interested in them.
Mm-hmm.
And not necessarily, I wouldn't really like put it on you that it was a recommendation and I rated it like lower than you did. I think everything you loved that I watched, I also loved.
Yeah.
I don't think we diverged there. I think there's just a few things you're like, this is okay. It's got some good parts. It's got some bad parts. It's a mooch. And I'm like, you know what? I just want to kind of check it out. You know, you described it like in an interesting way. A good example of that is Sense8.
Right.
Remember on Netflix?
Yep.
That had a really cool premise. And I love the way that you described it. You gave it a mooch. I watched it. I'm like, yeah, like the show's bad.
Yeah.
You know, like the premise is super cool. The way that you described it, you know, if that would have been like on the, you know, the jacket cover or, you know, the description under cover art, absolutely, I would watch this. But like I watched, you know, 1 or 2 episodes. I'm like, nah, this is terrible. You know, I did that for Sense8, also for Lock and Key, right, on Netflix as well, which is, you described it great. And you're like, look, it's not amazing, but, you know, this part is cool. I'm like, hey, I just want to check it out. I'm like, nah, this isn't for me.
Yeah.
So generally, I think that everything that you liked, I liked, and vice versa. But yeah, there are a few things that you were lukewarm on that I watched. I'm like, I agree, not just lukewarm, like, there's nothing in it for me.
Yeah. And that's fair enough, right? I think the only thing I can think of where it was definitely a skip for you, but wasn't for me, was probably Strange New Worlds, the latest Star Trek show.
Yeah.
I
wonder if I'm being too, you really loved it.
It's not that, I don't know if you're being too critical or if I'm being too generous. It could be a mix of both. I really like Star Trek. I'm a big Star Trek fan in general. Yeah. I will say I did message you after I saw it. I remember specifically messaging you to tell you, after having watched just the intro, mind you, I had never felt this excited about watching a new Star Trek IP in a long time.
Wow.
So I remember when I saw that first episode, when I finished that intro, I was quite pleased with it, I must say. Having said that, I will also recognize that it's not the best Star Trek show. It's certainly not the worst. There are definitely shows out there that I think are much worse in the Star Trek universe, but it's not the best. And I also recognize that, hey, it's the first season. Let them stretch their legs. Let them get it on. You know, it's the same in most TV series. It's rare for a long-running franchise to hit the mark running out of the gate. So,
do you think if you take Star Trek and Star Wars, which are kind of like the two sci-fi franchises that kind of like really started things off in like the 70s, right? Or maybe even earlier in the case of Star Trek.
Yeah.
They've taken different approaches, right? Because Star Wars is the Star Wars franchise, and now everything else is kind of like a little bit, you know, it's the spinoffs, right? Everything that's a little bit of adjacent to it. Whereas Star Trek is like, I mean, when I think of Star Trek, it's Kirk, it's Spock, it's Sulu, those are the Star Trek guys, right? And maybe they've had some reboots, right? I mean, Chris Pine played Kirk, which you never see in the Star Wars universe. But now there's Star Treks that don't have any Kirk or Spock. They're kind of prequels, or they've got someone who's, you know, kind of related to that universe, but they're still on the Enterprise or something, Discovery or something, but they're still kind of deemed Star Trek, which is kind of like the branding. So maybe that's also you know, like causing me a little bit of like... Star Trek was
the first one to do it between the two of them. I think Star Wars is now starting to do that because of Disney Plus, where you're starting to see stories set in the same universe, but not involving the same characters. Like the Skywalker saga it is complete. And so that allows the TV series and even other movies to kind of flirt in that universe and to play in that universe and sandbox without talking about Luke or Darth Vader or Anakin or Obi-Wan, any one of number one of these shows, right? I would have said to a greater extent The Mandalorian was the perfect example of that, But of course, that's not the case. Last season of Mandalorian, pretty much was all about getting Mark Hamill back. Or not all about it, but it played a really important part of it. So fine, but in general, that's the show that I think shows that you can have a series set in the same universe without involving the same characters. And you're right, Star Trek was by and far the first one to do it.
Did we pick what we've got to do to kick off 2023? What are we doing?
Yeah, so we're going to continue 2023 in earnest. I'm sure our listeners or at least people who are watching on YouTube will notice that we are trying something new. We've got a little bit more of an more of a video element to our
It's
audio.
Visual now. We're visual. More or less.
We're giving this a shot to see how it goes. But anyway, let's kick off 2023 with our new streamer skip.
Mm-hmm.
We've updated our lists marginally. We're going to have to add to it because my list for you is slightly longer than yours for mine.
Yeah.
But we'll add to it. There's plenty of time. We've still got lots of shows that we haven't seen yet. I have got for next week, I will be watching a show on Hulu called Future Man.
What's it about? You have any idea?
Nothing.
I chose it for you. I cannot remember it all.
No clue. And you will be watching a show called The DMZ or just DMZ on HBO Max.
I would say this is either about the rapper or the North Korean demilitarized zone?
Yeah, that's correct. I have no idea. I remember specifically writing this down and putting it on your list, and now it's been so long, I don't remember what it's about.
Yeah. Okay, well, good. Now we've got two big surprises coming up this week.
That's right. So here's to 2023. Here's to another 50-odd episodes of Streamer Skip.
Yeah, if we can, I mean, this year we did 26, which is obviously, half the year. We started, we were pretty disciplined doing this every week, but I think that we started obviously mid-year, June, July, missing only a few weeks here or there when either one of us was traveling. But I agree, if we can knock out, somewhere between 40 plus streaming series a year, that's a huge accomplishment because we'll definitely have seen some stuff that we wouldn't otherwise have been exposed to, And when you combine it between you and I, that's somewhere between 80 to 100 different shows that we'll be reviewing.
Yeah.
Not an insignificant amount of television to be watching.
No, not at all. Not at all. In any case, though, if you want to help us out, the best way you can help us out, of course, is by liking and subscribing and commenting on these videos. And the other way you can do it is drop us a comment or send us a DM at F&S Podcast on Twitter or at Films and Stuff Podcast on Instagram or aloha at filmsandstuffpodcast.com. Let us know what other shows you want us to watch. If there's any show you think we should put on our list, drop us a line. We will put that up and we will automatically elevate that to take priority over the rest of our list.
Yep. There's a lot of stuff coming on in 2023. So let's prioritize what we want to watch first.
Perfect.
Pete, thank you for a great 2022. It's been a pleasure. Enjoy the last few hours of this year. Listeners, do the same.
Thanks, everyone. Happy New Year. Happy holidays. New Year. Whatever you celebrate, we're celebrating it with you. And we look forward to continuing our journey with you in 2023.
2023. Thanks, everyone. Thanks
guys.
Pete. Bye now.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Films and Stuff. If you haven't already, please subscribe and review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever podcasts are downloaded. Films and Stuff. There is no substitute.